Good morning, everybody. It's Wednesday, our final day of the summit.
To start this morning, without no further ado, I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Sarra.
Well, good morning. Great to see you, and let me just reiterate that sense of euphoria about last night and even yesterday and the day before. Such a great occasion, and so good to be back together. This morning I wanted to just revisit some of the essences of the Stronger, Smarter philosophy. I want to take some time to look back, and then I want to take some time to speak about, during this address, the challenges for the Stronger, Smarter Institute and for all of us in the years ahead. So instead of me just talking about the past like in the olden days when I had black hair, what I'm going to do is, and given that I saw plenty of people hitting out hard last night, I'm going to give you an easy start. So I'm giving myself an easy start as well. So we've just got a short 14-minute film that takes us right back. Some of you will recognise yourselves and others in this piece. And let me make this point. The Institute started in 2005, Easter 2005. We ran our first leadership program, I think, in 2006. And I want to acknowledge the two kind of longest stayers. Where is Paul Tracy? And there he is. Stand up, Paul. And Donna Bridge. Who've been with us the longest in many ways as far as participants in schools on the journey. When we set the Institute up, we said we wanted to change the tide of low expectations of Indigenous children in Australian schools. What a remarkable achievement to be able to stand here and say, we reckon we've done that, accepting that the results are still yet to flow in some places. But we'll get there, you know, we'll get there. I guess it's fair to say that at that time, which is 10 and 15 years ago now, people weren't really listening to blackfellas that much, you know. And so...
And all of a sudden you come to the school and just brought in Strong and Smart.
Yeah.
And I remember you just being in demand. I was on the phone all the time because people wanted you to go to their schools and speeches and that.
I was in a position with authority. I was the principal of the school, and so I could do the things that I had talked about and the things I'd thought about for a long time.
And you also said that it would be Australia-wide, and where is it now?
Yeah, and that's the thing too.
It is Australia-wide.
Yeah, I remember really well. And you know, like we'd sit in the staff rooms at Cherbourg and say, this is more than just about us here at Cherbourg now. Yes, we're going to play a part in transforming the lives of kids in your classroom. You have to understand that it's going to play a part in transforming the community, and it's going to play a part in transforming the whole country in many sorts of ways. And so it's not just about us anymore. And I think people got that, you know, like particularly guys like Hooper and Fred, and you know, I think of some of the young teachers we had, Simon Kelly and Rob Blatchford, and that they understood exactly what it was
all about.
What it was about, yeah.
So why leadership? Why did you start the leadership program?
You know, it was a good story. You know, things changed dramatically. And we figured if we can get a whole range of different sorts of people in a whole range of different sorts of schools to understand one philosophical approach, that was the Stronger, Smarter approach, then we could make a difference, and there would be no excuses for anybody anymore. And then it made sense just to set up a kind of a learning institute where we could run leadership activities. We ran the very first leadership program. We met some pretty special people Yeah. Who are the ones you remember from there?
Donna.
Paul Tracy from Newcastle came along and just really lapped it up and it just took off, you know. And then it was nice to know that they'd gone back to their schools, and in some ways they'd transformed their own schools as a result of what they'd heard, but in some ways they had already done a lot in their schools, and it was a matter of just reinforcing or consolidating that message and kind of giving them license to go harder, if you like. So that was kind of neat. You know, what was powerful about what we did in the early stages was not the big-headed academic kind of information given, but more the real kind of authentic stories from people who are in schools and doing the stuff, you know, not from people who'd flitted in and out and just watched on, so that people could hear from other people who were doing it and who had done it, kind of thing. And that's what made it richer.
Word started getting around and started to get some more funding in.
And the Telstra Foundation and the Sydney Myer Foundation had come to us. It was great, you know, not only to have their interest, but to have some really key kind of leaders from around the country recognise the good work that we were doing. Herb Elliott had come to visit us at the school a couple of times, and he was such a nice man. And I remember him saying to me one day, he said, "Chris, he says, what I've seen here is like nothing else I've seen in the country, and nobody's talking in the way that you guys are talking here. You know, this is real. You know, you're talking about a way that offers hope for Aboriginal people." He says, "If there's anything we can do, then let me know, and we'll, you know, if we can find a way to get this to go to other places, let me know." And yeah, they invested some good money into us, and it made a difference.
Sort of all clicked together when we moved down to Caboolture.
And so with the dollars that they invested, we were able to establish a whole new
institute.
Yeah, and a whole new team.
How many do we have?
About 12 of us, I think.
Yeah, the boys come on, and Sharon.
Yeah, Sharon was a gem. Sometimes you just meet these kind of gems and you just know. I think she recognised in us something that was good as well.
Yeah.
So it was just a perfect
She's got that passion as well, and that just all, I don't know, it just all clicked with her.
There are some people who are just stronger, smarter to the bone, and she was one of them, and we were able to get a few other people around and assemble a really good team that was really committed.
We had Sharon and Scotty and Spilly and JD.
They came with something good and a way of doing business that kind of worked, and it just fitted nicely together. It evolved into something that's really world class now, and it's recognised as that by a whole bunch of people around. Strengths about the national programs where you can get a whole bunch of people from right across the country, but there's also some strengths about the regional programs that we run where you can get a whole cohort of people in a particular region all on the same page, and so that's pretty powerful. Where was the first one we did?
I think it was Hunter. They just took it on board, and
it was led by Karen Jones. In all of the places we've gone, we've seen that as a really key difference, where you've got that kind of regional director, schools director, in partnership with principals. It seems to work really powerful. You know, there's a whole bunch of other places where we've seen it work really well as well.
Kimberley.
Yeah, the Kimberley. Where else?
Coffs Harbour. And I think the impact is still the same as the national, and it is the same as the national.
We did a
a regional program in northern New South Wales and around Coffs
North
Harbour.
Coast, yeah. Coffs Harbour,
North
yeah.
Coast. And they really took off, hey? Because aren't they doing like a community thing
They've
now?
just,
So
they've done their first community program, the Stronger Smarter.
how's that
That's
going?
just getting in all the community people and the teacher aides in that. I witnessed the last bit of it for the first program. Amazing to see those community people in the room and doing the Stronger Smarter ways as well.
Because it's like at every level now, isn't it? We've been able to touch regional directors at that kind of bureaucrat level and principals at schools and some teachers and community people as well. So what do you reckon has been the magic of that? It's kind of just worked.
Like you said, there's no magic bullet and everyone thought that it was. It's just like that personal journey. Some are very emotional and yeah, it's just having a deep look inside themselves. And just end of the week, they're just like new, just blooming again. I don't know, just revitalised.
So do you reckon we're making a difference?
I've seen it. I've been to the Kimberley, I've done a road trip over there. I've been to the small schools, been in their classrooms.
But it's so hard to quantify in all sorts of ways.
And it doesn't happen overnight, it takes time. It is a journey.
Yeah, and it's a long journey too, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the magic of it for those people who were already good educators, but they just understood absolutely that it's okay. You know, and that they're not alone. I think that was really important, a really important part about what we were doing. I also think of Dion Anderson at Cabbage Tree Island School, who again was doing a good job. She said, when I did the Stronger Smarter stuff, I just understood that it was okay to push as hard, because at the time I wasn't sure whether I should be pushing hard to have high expectations of Aboriginal kids. And when I did the Stronger Smarter program, I just realised that it was okay. And I think it was like taking those little kind of spot fires around the place and then connecting them up so that we could get them talking to each other, and that was powerful, you know. So all of a sudden these little spot fires were joining and creating this kind of an inferno of high expectations right across the country that really did influence the conversations happening at government levels and within bureaucracies. This year we're coming up to how many?
50th?
Our 50th.
50th in
one.
October.
Yeah. And you think of the number of teachers, the number of community people, and the number of kind of school principals involved and regional directors. And then you consider the sort of amount of children, the number of children that they touch. It's quite remarkable in a way when you think it was just you and me and Merv.
Yeah.
But from something that started so simple, we were able to touch children right across the country.
We've got 400 or 500 participants who've taken part just in the Kimberley.
Yeah.
Imagine all around Australia.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty cool. And to think that we could stand at our summit and say the tide of low expectations has changed. And I really believe that, you know, that when you think of it in terms of that started off as a ripple and it changed the whole tide. But what I love about it is that we go back to the source of the ripple, and that's go back to Cherbourg.
Where it all
and
started.
the community through the national programs.
The Cherbourg Community and Stronger Smart Institute's just got that relationship now that you can feel the warmth when you just drive in there, and they're so proud to have us there at the ration shed where we do our programs now.
Yeah, they love it.
The big thing for me is seeing these people from all over Australia come to Cherbourg, to the ration shed, because a lot of them haven't got an idea what happened to our mob all those years ago.
It's just so cool, so neat to be able to go back to Cherbourg, to the source of the ripple that changed the whole tide of low expectations of kids right across the country.
So what do you think, Chris? There'll be another 50 programs? Will we keep going?
Oh, yeah.
So it's pretty special. Hands up if you saw yourself up there. Anybody around? Cool, nice. So the 50th program is next week in Cherbourg. And yeah, as I said there, and I can't emphasise this enough, just how nice it is to go back to Cherbourg and to have people with us like Pop John over there, Auntie Ada, who've been with us all along. It's pretty cool, hey? And I'll be there at the next one as well. There's Michelle making me work. I'm supposed to be on holidays, but she wants me to. So I'll be there on Tuesday night. But I'm never there on Thursday nights. So I said I'd revisit this Stronger, Smarter philosophy, one that honours a positive sense of cultural identity, acknowledging and embracing positive community leadership, enabling innovative and dynamic approaches and processes that are anchored by high expectations relationships. High expectations relationships, from our perspective, are those which honour the humanity of others, and in so doing acknowledge one's strengths, capacity, and human right to emancipatory opportunity. It is about doing things with people, not to them. And let me stand here as an educator and say this to you, that it is deliberately philosophical. We will never tell you, we would never tell any community, any educator, what literacy programs they should run in, what literacy programs you should run in your school, what pedagogies to enact, what curriculum framework to adapt. Because we talk about a strength-based approach, it is necessary for us to honour your strengths as well. And we would never assume that you can't make those decisions. Of course, we can offer guidance and assistance and get you connected to other people from similar profiles of your communities and your schools. But that is your decision, and we respect that. And so we will resist always any pressure to further develop the philosophy to tell you that you should be doing any particular kind of curriculum framework or whatever. And I commit to you that that will never happen. And I think part of my message that I wanted to share this morning is that at various points we have to stop and remind ourselves of our own strengths. While the Stronger, Smarter approach is just as much about saying to young Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children, you must see yourself as excellent, it is just as much about us as teachers, principals, educators, community people. We are saying we must see ourselves, we must continue to see ourselves as excellent and having the capacity to make a difference in the lives of children. And I'm reminded here of Russell Bishop's words yesterday about that notion of agency. About the notion of agency and knowing that in here, in our own humanity, we have the capacity to make a difference to the lives of others. And we should never relinquish that. And we should never let others take that capacity from our profession. We must acknowledge within us our capacity for excellent teacher practices, excellent teacher qualities, and these are things that we usually know. We usually know how to be a great teacher. We usually know how to be a great teacher in the classroom. We usually know how to be great in relationships. But sometimes we forget this. Sometimes we buy into, like too many others have, the kind of smoke around the complexities of Aboriginal children and Torres Strait Islander children. And sometimes some people fail to see the student because of all the black faces in the room. Can I also note here that part of our philosophy is about acknowledging the strengths. Don't cringe when you hear me say this, but it's true, and I mean it with conviction. It's about acknowledging the strengths that exist and the good things that exist in bureaucracies. We're not into creating quasi-bureaucracies to do the job that the existing one was supposed to do. We're not into sucking millions of dollars from various programs across nationally to concentrate on creating a quasi-bureaucracy to do the job that the initial bureaucracy is supposed to do. This is an approach that is so clearly unsustainable, and it defies the kind of stronger, smarter approach and the kind of notion that something is good in what we do. Yes, we have challenges, but we must make the time to sniff the breeze and find out what is good, what is working. The other approach, setting up new empires, is problematic. As I said, unsustainable, because if it fails, it fails. And if it succeeds, it fails also, because it can never be extrapolated to other places, because it will simply blow the budget. So, at Stronger, Smarter, with our approach, we're not into creating empires. We're into creating networks and positive relationships. That is what is sustainable. This is about making time to sniff the breeze, to establish what is good in individuals, what is good in schools, in communities, in bureaucracies. One of the first pillars or insights, if you like, of the Stronger, Smarter philosophy is about acknowledging and embracing a positive sense of identity. And any blackfellow in the room here will know why this is so important. Anyone who's a parent of an Aboriginal child or Torres Strait Islander child will know why this is so important. Because sometimes we can give our kids messages that being a blackfellow is positive, but often the messages they will receive from society is that Aboriginal is something to be ashamed of. That is changing, I'm happy to know. That is changing. But it doesn't change the importance of what we have to do in schools. There is so much work to be undone here, and that is why nurturing a positive sense of identity in our schools lays the platform for a more positive, stronger, smarter future for Aboriginal children, for Torres Strait Islander children, for all children. Some have described it as, I have tried to naively, I think, and with little understanding of what this is really about, have tried to describe this as black is beautiful. And I think if you have led what Ian Mackey would call the, I forget what it wasn't the Sofitel life, what was it, the Marriott life? What is it, the Marriott experience? If you've had the Marriott experience in life, I understand that it would be difficult for you to come to grips with this kind of complexity. And so for those who want to reduce the Stronger, Smarter kind of philosophical approach to just black is beautiful, my message is this: black is beautiful, and black is strong, and black is smart. And don't ever try to pretend that it's not. Assuming everyone in the school should be subjected to a remedial program is collusion with low expectations and a negative stereotype of all Aboriginal children as having special needs. So if you want to know what it doesn't look like, I'll give you 3 words. Engelmann's direct instruction is collusion with low expectations. It is an approach that dishonours the humanity of Aboriginal children. It is an approach that dishonours the humanity and the agency and capacity of us as teachers. It dishonours us by taking that which is the magic out of the teacher-student relationship. And it is in that relationship where potential is unveiled. And we should never do this. What does it truly look like? I don't really need to explain this to you. All I'm going to say is think about what you saw last night with the Gowrie boys. Strong, smart, young, black and deadly. As I watched them last night, I remembered in my ears the words of my good friend and a colleague who I value and deeply respect from Victoria, Lionel Bamblett. The words he said just yesterday: it's really great that we have Koori doctors and lawyers, but they have to be comfortable in their own skin. Such profound words. And I watched those young men last night, and I watched young men comfortable in their own skin, on a trajectory that will see some of them as doctors and lawyers and whatever they choose to be. This is why we have strong and smart. It is the whole package. And it works for poor white kids too. And it works for rich white kids too, you know. And again, I reflect on the words of Professor Russell Bishop when he says, what is good for Māori is good for others. I think white Australia can be led by us in this regard. And you know of people who've gone overseas to Europe and they've said that they've felt more fulfilled, more stronger, more complete when they visited the graves of their ancestors in Ireland or other parts of Europe. So they know what it feels like, and they can be led by us to reconnect with their sense of ancient identity as well. In some ways, this really is about re-enchanting the world. This is probably the first pillar. And again, let me explain. This is complex, yet at some point it's simple. We either collude with a stronger, smarter Aboriginal student identity, or we don't. It's that simple. We either collude with a positive identity, or we reinforce a negative stereotype. And we must get this. All educators must get this. All Indigenous parents must get this. At Cherbourg, in our values program, we talked about head, hand and heart. And the message within this is that we must understand the need to embrace a positive sense of identity in our head. Intellectually, we must understand that a stronger, smarter Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander student identity does exist, and that the negative stereotype is just that, just a negative stereotype. Intellectually, we must understand that. And so in our hearts, we must become committed to pursue excellence for the children in front of us. This is what it's about. And so if in our head we understand this, and if our hearts we are committed to this, then that will prompt us to do different things with our hands. It will prompt us to think about the pedagogies that we enact in our classrooms. It will prompt us to think about how we engage with children and create learning experiences for them. I've talked already and extensively about the notion of embracing positive Aboriginal leadership or positive community leadership in communities. And again, I think I've simplified it in this kind of way, uncomfortable about its being anchored by connections to notions of victimhood. But in some ways, it's the best way to describe it. We must understand that there are types of leadership, and I've described them as this way. Those that are about being the victim. Those who are saying to us as leaders in schools, well, you've got to feel sorry for us. And so if Aboriginal kids can't turn up to school by 9 o'clock, let's just let them start at 10 o'clock. That is colluding with victim status. That is colluding with low expectations and a negative stereotype. There is the other, which you know very well, which is also about low expectations and collusion with a negative stereotype. Booting the victim, assuming that capacity doesn't exist, assuming that they are so hopeless, assuming that the best we can do for them is a remedial program to lift them to maybe a point where they can be domestics or work on a farm or something like that. The kind of leadership that we should aspire to embrace in our communities and nurture is that which is about being beyond the victim. This is a type of high expectations leadership that colludes with what I call a stronger, smarter sense of being Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. And let me give you an example of how this plays out. And if you've met this guy, he's a super guy, Brian Hughes from Shepparton College, who creates structures in his school to pay elders as his mentors. And when he has complex challenges that he has to confront, he gets them in and he sits down, he says, this is my challenge. Where's Brian? Is he here? I hope I'm not dishonouring your story, but it is one that has integrity. So he says, this is my challenge, this is what I'm facing. So some of the old people will listen to him, they'll go away and talk in their own language, and they'll come back half an hour later on and they'll say, have a think about doing this. That is embracing positive community leadership. I talked on Monday about high expectations relationships. And if you think I'm trying to emphasise one particular word there, you just might be right. Again, it's about doing things with people, not to them. It is about being fair and firm. It is about carrots and sticks simultaneously. It is about compassion and a type of courage. And as I said, just being firm with no appreciation for how to be fair signals a low expectations relationship. Just being fair, as I said the other day, so open-minded our brains fall out, without the courage to be firm, signals a low expectations relationship. At some point in our conversations we have to have with children, or we have to have with parents, we have to have the courage to say, this is not good enough. I expect better for your child. All carrot with too much compassion is low expectations. All stick with so-called courage is low expectations. Can I give you an example? This was from a school I saw in the Kimberley. Because I want to compare this to a zero-tolerance approach. And I want to make this clear. A zero-tolerance approach has the veneer of high expectations. So if a principal says, I want every child in the room to have shoes and socks and a school uniform, that sounds like high expectations. It sounds like high expectations. And so any child who turns up with no shoes on is sent home. Sounds like high expectations, but it is not a high expectations relationship. In a high expectations relationship, the principal, somebody who's as decent as Brian Hughes, will say, here's my expectation. All children in the school should have a uniform and shoes and socks. And because the dialogue is open, because the relationship is authentic, there is room then for people in community to say, well, yes, that's a good expectation. But you know what? I got 12 kids in my house and I got no washing machine. And as soon as one kid throws one uniform down, somebody else will pick it up and run with it. So, yes, look, I like what you're saying, but it's really hard for me to live up to that. And so together in that authentic dialogue, we approach a solution. And some schools have done this by keeping uniforms at school. And when kids turn up with no shoes on or no uniforms, they come up with their home clothes, put on clean school clothes, wear them for the day, and they look fantastic. I'm thinking of Bayulu in the Kimberley. They look fantastic. And at the end of the day, they swap over. This is an example of a high expectations relationship. This is about doing things with people, not to people. And it's interesting to reflect on some of the challenges that have been described about remote communities and wonder about the toxicity of low expectations. And here I'm thinking of Clifton and his Zumba team at Halls Creek. There's Clifton over here. One of those schools that we read about in The Australian some years ago as iconically a disaster zone, like ground zero. I was there less than 6 months ago, and this is a school with exceptional people in there. Some of them you heard from yesterday. That is a high expectations school with a high expectations relationship with community. And the reason I raise that is for this, to wonder about the effect of that. And I make this point that lazy and incompetent teachers will thrive in a low expectations, toxic relationship. And the data says from such schools, and I'm not talking just about remote schools now, the data says in those kinds of tough schools that quality teaching, or the data says we need the best teachers. But historically, we've gotten the worst. I won't revisit words I've used to describe such people in the past. But lazy and incompetent people will thrive in that kind of environment because they're never challenged. And they'll come in and they'll sit around and push play on the DVD player and they'll survive. Not achieving anything, and they'll catch some great fish along the way. I'm thinking also of Kalambaru as I speak. What happens is this. In a low expectations, toxic environment, a good quality teacher comes in, like the data says it needs to, and be frustrated by the toxicity of that low expectations environment. An ordinary teacher will come in and can be drawn down into that. There is a risk of that, and I've watched that happen in places. But your excellent teachers, they'll be gone within a very short time. They'll say, I didn't sign up for this, and they'll go looking for something else that is more honourable. And so this creates the complexity of teacher turnover and all of those sorts of challenges, which somehow remote communities get the blame for, and the tough hardcore metropolitan schools get the blame for. But there's hope, because the reverse of that is true also. If you run a school like Halls Creek in the way that Clifton Fong does, he runs it with high expectations. And so an excellent teacher will come into that environment, and an ordinary, a kind of average teacher will come into that environment and be inspired and be challenged to be better. And a teacher who is lazy and incompetent will come into that environment, and they will be the ones disappearing after 3 months, because their colleagues expose them and let them know that their laziness and their incompetence is not good enough. So there is hope with a high expectations environment. Let me take some time just to reflect on the challenges. You'll notice I've skipped over the pillars about, the insights about innovation, because I think that's an unlimited conversation. The challenge for us as we contemplate the road ahead is knowing that this is about all of us. And in the same way, you know, as I said to teachers at Cherbourg School some years ago, that this is not just about our children in our school. We have the potential here to influence and change practice right across the country. And in the same way as I said that to my colleagues at Cherbourg, I'm saying that message to you. And I'm not changing the message, because the message is pure. And I say to you, as we contemplate the road ahead, this is not just about you and your remote locations or you and your school. This has the potential and the power to influence and change things right across Australia and influence other things that are happening around the world. So don't ever underestimate the power of our own stories. I say be patient and be persistent, and I kind of invoke the words of Frederick Douglass there. If there is no struggle, there is no progress. We've never said at any stage that this is easy. This is really, really hard work. And some people all of a sudden can get committed to making a difference in education and become disheartened after 1 year or 2 years when the results don't shift. And again, I reflect on the words of Professor Bishop over here, that the change will come. The change will come. We just need to be patient. We just need to be persistent. And you know, sometimes this is cruel. But sometimes we will slog our guts out and we will sweat our blood to take the baton from here to here, not having seen the results, but being content that we've handed the baton over to somebody here, knowing that they can take it to a point where they get to see the results. That is an altruistic and unselfish kind of attitude, but it's one that we must understand. Some months ago, you will have seen an article in The Australian challenging me about the data about Stronger, Smarter. It was an article by Janet Albrechtsen. And it was an interesting article. Now, me, personally, I would question the motives and the extent to which she was committed to truly understanding what was going on in the kind of Stronger, Smarter approach. But it was a challenge to me that was right. It was a challenge to me that was good. And I'm not one to back away from that. And whilst I might mock the messenger, I would not be silly enough to ignore the message and reflect on some of the gems or some of the lessons that might be in there. And the lessons are this: as an institute, we need better financial transparency. And I'm committed to that. And I accept that we need to get better at that. But as a Stronger, Smarter movement, if you like, the challenge for us is articulating our story better, getting the data right, getting the evidence right, and being able to tell that in a way that is substantial, accepting all of the complexities around data, but not ever being shy of them, or not ever being intimidated by the challenge. So I'm saying to you, as we contemplate a way forward, let's embrace challenge. In our leadership programs, we say when confronted with feedback or criticism, do we respond with defensiveness or do we respond with opportunity, or the notion of opportunity? This is a time to reflect and wonder about what opportunities there are to learn from such criticisms. And as I said to you, it is right for people to challenge us. And we should never be intimidated by such a challenge, because we're onto something good here. Let's not be intimidated by the calls for data or for evidence. And I want to just take a moment to reflect on a story of somebody who I've come to admire greatly. Mel Meninga was the coach of the State of Origin football team. Where are my New South Wales colleagues? Come on, put your hand up. And to the other states, I'm talking about the real football here. So Mel Meninga is like a god. Ben Wilson's here, who's related to him in some way. Where's Ben? Anyway. And I also want to point out, I've got Tony Curry down the front here, who is a legend of the game, one of the greatest Indigenous players to get into the game. Played 15 State of Origins, played 7 tests and 2 grand finals. We're both with the Bulldogs, one with Bulldogs and one with Broncos. Yeah, so welcome, Tony. So you would think if Mel Meninga can lead a team to win a series 7-0, something's good about the culture of what they do there, right? New South Wales is pretty good. You know, they've had good teams, but we've always been that little bit better. So I asked Mel, what are you laughing at? That's really cruel. And just a quick announcement, there's no child in primary school in New South Wales that has ever experienced an Origin win. But I know that's cruel, but... Where's Paul Tracy again? Sorry, mate. There's Trace from, yeah. They're hungry for a win next year. Actually, they're starving. I'm thinking like malnutrition by now. But anyway, after I said to Mal, I got my mouth guard and boots here if ever you need me, he just said, no thanks, keep your phone handy. So I'm hearing keep my phone handy for Origin. I've still got the text in my phone to prove it. But I said to Mal, what is it? What's the magic? And he says, Chris, when I tell my boys to run on the field, I tell them to ignore the scoreboard and just be excellent. Be the best that you can be and a little bit more if you can. And if you are the best that you can be and a little bit more, the scoreboard will take care of itself. And most times it will fall in your favour. Sometimes it won't, but that's okay, as long as you walk off knowing that you've done the best. And the analogy here, I think, for us is that NAPLAN and other pieces of data is the scoreboard. And we must accept that there are complexities around that. There has been for the last, however, with diagnostic testing, there will be for the next 100 years. We accept that there are complexities, but we must understand that that is the scoreboard. And let's not get obsessed with that. Let's get obsessed with being excellent on the field. And our field is our classrooms and our schools and our communities. Let's be excellent in that space. Let's be excellent in that space, and the scoreboard will take care of itself. And again, I reflect on Professor Bishop from yesterday. To reiterate this point, he said the data will take care of itself. He said the data will come, didn't you? And so I was driving people mad, I'm sure, yesterday and the day before, scooting around, trying to get pieces of data. And Herb has challenged me around this, and rightfully so, that we need to get our stories right. And we do. Let me give you some stories of ways of catching data and telling a story. So at Yarrabah, of 173 students assessed this year, 50% of those kids are above 90%. 50% of those kids with above 90% attendance, of them 85 achieved above 100% improvement, some of them up to 200 and 300% improvement. Those kids who were, there were 30% of kids of that 173, between 60 and 90% attendance, more than half of them achieved more than 100% improvement in reading. And if you hear your school, sing out if you want to.
Yes!
Glenroy Heights. There's Spike over there. Where's Spike? Stand up, Spike.
Yeah, I'm right here, mate. So proud. Thank
North
you.
Prince, you're welcome. Thank you. Thank you, Spike. Glenroy Heights, led by Jane initially down here. 2004, 0% of children in Band 3 or above. Or 100% of children in Band 1 on the bottom. The top is Band 6 in 2012. 100% of children in Band 3 or above on all aspects of NAPLAN, except for those children with special needs. Shepperton College, led by Brian, 2008, teacher retention to 4 years. 2 out of 40 in 2008. In 2012, teacher retention to 4 years, 10 out of 40. 2008, there was no Yolngu staff qualified at Cert 2 or above. In 2012, 17 Yolngu staff qualified at Cert 2 or above. Before I go on, let me stop for a moment and make this clear. And I've said this to each of you individually, that I've never pretended that this kind of change occurs because you've done the Stronger, Smarter Leadership program. I would never dishonour you and claim the glory of your hard work and your guts and determination in your own communities. This is about your work. All we're saying is, with a stronger, smarter approach, these are the sorts of things that can happen. If you nurture a positive sense of identity and are determined to collude with a positive sense of identity and challenge and reject a stereotype, if you embrace positive community leadership, if you have high expectations, relationships, these are the sorts of things that can happen. We bring the philosophy, you bring the hard work. I want to make that clear. Cairns West, Michael, where's Bulbai? Who's there? I've forgotten your last name. Michael Hansen, I just know him as Bulbai. Black kids from Kawanyama called him that and it stuck with him. With the academic success guarantee, his enrolments increased from 450, how long ago was that, Michael? Just 3 years ago, from 450 to 650 within 3 years. There's some data for you. Black kids in that community are saying, we like what's happening in your school. They like a school that nurtures a positive identity. They like a school that embraces positive leadership. They like a school with high expectations. So when they turn up there, they're guaranteed success in a conversation with Michael. Babinda, here's some data for you. That mightn't seem significant, but it is significant. Where's Matt? He's around here somewhere as well. At the start of 2012, the principal had one meeting with Aboriginal parents to ask, what do you want for your children? For many years prior to this, there were 0 conversations to ask, what do you want for your children? And when Matt asked those old ladies, some of them started to cry and they said, we've never been asked this before. That's data and that's significant. Barrowville, where's Mel? Indigenous student enrolment risen from 15% historically to 25%, so we get 70 students, a 60% reduction in long and short-term suspensions within 18 months. He says the Northern New South Wales 2014 targets were 65% for retention and 80% for attendance. Both of those exceeded by 2011. He's not only closed the gap, he's smashed it to bits. And he's challenged the rest of them, he's challenged his department to raise their expectations as well with the hard work of him and the hard work of his team. 2010, 2 Indigenous staff. 2012, 6 Indigenous staff, and 3 of those are halfway through a teaching degree. Young Indigenous men from the local community. At Broome in 2011, 19 out of 20, 95% of Indigenous students graduate at year 12. In 2012, 30 graduate. Now this is, if you looked at, I didn't have the 2008 figures, but it's quite significant. 100% retention of Aboriginal students from year 8 in 2007 to year 12 in 2011. Minyeri, led by my old mate Neil Gibbo, who's not there anymore. Attendance has always been good because of the stronger, smarter kind of relationships. Further improved from 84% to 93.3%. Hunter Central Coast, New South Wales, with a regional approach, Indigenous attendance has risen from 80% to 87% over 3 years. Bairnsdale College, where's Graham? Quite a guy and quite some data. And my glasses are not going to let me read. I wish I'd have printed that bigger. Year 9 and 10 Indigenous student attendance in 2000 was less than 20%. Let me say that again. Year 9 and 10, Indigenous student attendance in 2000 was less than 20%. And somehow we were comfortable with that. But with a kind of high expectations, a stronger, what I call a stronger, smarter approach, all of a sudden the leader of that middle school, Graham Blackley, was no longer comfortable with that. In 2012, 9 and 10, Indigenous student attendance is greater than 80%. Thanks, Graham. Retention, year 12 up to 2008 was usually less than 10%. In 2010, 11 and 12, 100% Indigenous student retention to year 12. And again, I make this point. We're not saying that, and some of the researchers think this, that they think they're researching the effect of doing the leadership program, you get this kind of results. We're not saying that for a second. We would never dishonour you. And we understand, because we're in a rich relationship with you that I value tremendously. So we come with the philosophy. We might help guide, shape and influence your thinking. But we would never claim the glory of your hard work and your guts and determination in your schools and your communities. It was my intention this morning to spend some time getting you to think about your own stories and give you some time to articulate, be scaffolded by some of the things that you saw about how to create and construct data about your own stories. I was going to give you 10 minutes to do that this morning, but I'm running a little bit over. I'm going to try and get us back on time. But I do encourage you to do that, to think about your own stories and how you can get your story right. Anything is data about positive progress. And do you know something else? Sometimes the data won't show a shift. Sometimes it will go backwards. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. Sometimes you might be re-engaging Aboriginal children or Torres Strait Islander children or poor white kids who've been chronically disengaged from schools for 4 to 5 years. You might re-engage 20 kids into your school. And what does that do to your literacy and numeracy data? It's going to send it down. You know, we accept the complexity, but that is still a positive thing, isn't it, surely? I've watched other places close by that will sideline kids and create such smoke and mirrors about the data to try to present a good story. And let's not do that. Let's embrace this challenge with integrity. Let's not be intimidated by the data. Let's not quote the bottom end data from one campus and the top end data from another campus and say, well, attendance in the place has improved from 30% to 90%. That's smoke and mirrors. That is dishonourable. We're not about that. In closing, again, I reflect on Frederick Douglass. He must have been a smart guy. But he come from an era where they talked about, they weren't savvy about gender issues, so I wished he said broken men and women. But you know, it is easier, it is better to build strong children than to repair broken men and women. And I realised that this is hard work. And I realised that it gets tough. But you know, when it gets tough for me, I think about the children that I work with at Sherbrooke School. And I reflect on some of those kids who've chosen to take their lives. And I know that some of you will be able to reflect on kids who've done the same. And just know that any discomfort that we feel about challenging others to lift their game or be better is nothing compared to the kind of discomfort that they must have felt. And because of that reason, I will remain determined. I will continue to challenge. I won't be silenced when I see smoke and mirrors. I won't be silenced when I see somebody pretend that a remedial program is good enough for Aboriginal people. And whilst it may create discomfort for me and for you, when others kick back and they fight with us, and that discomfort is nothing compared to the discomfort of a young Aboriginal boy or girl who can't read or can't write. And that's why we've got to keep going. That's why we've got to build a more honourable future. I want to round things up by thanking and just noting some of the people who've believed in me. Gary McLennan was here yesterday, and he's been one of the greatest teachers in my life. I want to thank you, Herb, up the back there, for believing in me and for believing in the work of the Institute to the extent that you invested in us seriously and enabled us to make a difference. I appreciate your belief. I want to thank you, Pop John. Oh, man. I want to thank you, Pop John, for being with me, and to you, Auntie Ada, for the last 25 years. You know, remembering those days when I visited you at Cherbourg as the DEET officer, would you believe, setting up ASPA committees and stuff like that. And I'll never forget the day we went to see the regional director, and you ripped it into him and said, children are leaving our school for high school with year 1 and 2 standard, and that's not good enough. And when I got there as principal 10 years later, we found the same thing, but we started to care and we made a difference. So can I thank you too for being part of that. Again, I want to honour the people of Cherbourg who worked with me to start the ripple that changed the tide of low expectations. I want to thank the people within the Institute. It hasn't always been easy, you know, there have been times when we struggled. When we set the bar high for ourselves and we say we have to walk our own talk. When the bar is high, the challenges are complex. And sometimes we've got it right and sometimes we've got it wrong. Thank you, Michelle, for being there with me right from the start. I want to thank those people who've become part of the Stronger, Smarter network. And as I said earlier, this is more than just about us now. This is about influencing the people who are not here. And if we continue to be excellent on the field, which is our classrooms and our schools, the scoreboard will take care of ourselves, but others will be exposed by our excellence. Others will be exposed by our excellence to the extent that they have to come along because they'll recognise that we're on a more honourable journey. This is what the good teachers signed up for. And again, I say nobody said this would be easy. We just know it would be worth it. It's an honourable journey, one in which we honour the places that we've come from, one in which we stick up for Aboriginal children and for Torres Strait Islander children and for all children. This is about saving lives in some places, you know. And it's one in which we stick up for our profession. Thank you.
Thank you, brother. Can we please thank Dr. Chris Sarra once more?
Well, if you've been in a program with me, you know I'm the most emotional one, so I shouldn't even be talking. But can I just sincerely thank Chris for coming to Cherbourg? You not only changed those children's lives in the community, but mine as well, so yeah, thanks.